Hello world, welcome to my tutorial on how to play chess. In this tutorial, I will go over some of the basics about the board, introduce you to some of the pieces, and show you how they move and how they capture. Keep in mind that this is only a quick start guide, and I'm not going to go over every little detail, and you're by no means going to come out a grandmaster once you've finished watching this. But if you've never played chess before and you want to, or you have and you just don't remember how, this is a good place to start. So, if you're ready to get started, go ahead and type your name in the box there, and then click the button that says Start Tutorial, and we will begin. Alright, now the first thing I'd like to go over is the board itself. The board is a pretty important part of the game, in case you didn't know that. Okay, now the first thing that I want to mention here is something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to when they set up to play, and that's the board's orientation itself. You want to make sure that when you sit down at a board, that your right-hand side corner square is white. If that's a black square, you need to turn the board before you play, or else your position will be wrong and the game will just be a lost cause. The chessboard is made up of 64 alternating light and dark squares. There are 8 rows of squares from front to back and 8 columns of squares from left to right. Now in chess, these rows and columns actually have different names. The rows, which go from front to back, are called the ranks. And the columns that go from left to right are called the files. Now these files and ranks have a coordinate system to label every square on the board, but in this tutorial I'm not going to really get into notation. Let's just take a look at the pieces and see what they can do. Okay, so let's talk about the pieces. In chess, each player gets 16 pieces. That's 8 pawns, 2 rooks, 2 knights, 2 bishops, 1 king, and 1 queen. Technically, the pawns aren't really considered pieces, but just for the sake of making things less confusing, we'll just call them all pieces. Okay, let's take a look at a pawn. The pawn is, well, for the most part, the weakest piece in a chess game, which is why you get 8 of them. However, you know, a group of pawns in the hands of a really good chess player can be really, really bad news for the opponent. But anyway, let's talk about how it moves. A pawn can move 1 square forward. Can't move backward. It's the only piece that actually cannot move backward. And it only moves 1 square forward. The only time a pawn can move more than 1 square at a time is for its very first move. The first time the pawn moves, you can actually move it either 1 or 2 squares forward. Now here we have a bishop. The bishop can move any number of squares diagonally, but only diagonally. And because of this diagonal movement, bishops will always stay on the same color throughout the entire game. And of course this is evened out by the fact that each player gets a white squared bishop and a black square bishop. And now we have a rook. The rook can move any number of squares along the ranks or the files. That means forward or backward, left or right. Now, like a bishop, it can go as many squares as it wants, but unlike a bishop, it doesn't move diagonally. Instead, it moves along the ranks of files. And now we have the all-powerful queen. The queen can move up, down, left, right, diagonal, any direction it wants, as many squares as it wants. One way to describe this would be to say that it has the power of a rook and a bishop combined, making it the most powerful piece in the chess game. And here is our poor, helpless, defenseless king. The king, which is of course the most important piece of a chess game, is also the weakest, and it moves like a queen in that it can move any direction, but only moves 1 square at a time. So if you've got your king on the run without other pieces to protect it, you're probably in pretty bad shape. And last but certainly not least is the knight. I saved the knight for last because of its peculiar movement. A knight moves in an L shape, which can be roughly described as 2 squares over, 1 square up, or 1 square down, 2 squares over, or 1 square over, and 2 squares up, or any one of those. It is also the only piece in chess that can actually jump over other pieces. Now the pieces it jumps over can be either your pieces or an opponent's pieces, but the pieces that are jumped over are not considered captured. We'll get into capturing later, but the only piece that's captured by a knight is the one that's occupying the square that the knight actually lands on, not the ones it jumps over. It's not like checkers. Checkers is lame. Well, unfortunately I'm out of time, so that concludes this portion of the tutorial. I left out a lot of stuff, obviously, how to checkmate and stalemate, and how draws and resigning works and all that kind of stuff, but I hope that you still learned something, something you could take with you. Like I said, you're not going to be a grandmaster now just because you watch this tutorial. I don't think that you can, watch this and then go win a tournament, but hopefully you can take something with you and, at least know what you're doing next time you play a game of chess.